You will never look at Call of Duty the same after you know this information. All of the research Activision is doing to defend their matchmaking systems and the state of the game is not genuine. It's all a lie. So bear with me, put on your tinfoil hats, and let's begin. For starters, the player base is arguing that COD's matchmaking is the worst for the players and making them want to quit the game out of frustration, mainly because the game is far too competitive and seems rigged at times. Then, Activision comes out with a matchmaking paper and blog talking about how, according to their research and data, their matchmaking system, contrary to the outspoken player experience, is actually the absolute best thing possible for the entire player base. You must realize that no matter what this data says, it's not really to support the argument we're attacking. They're defending the point that players are the most satisfied when their matchmaking system, we'll call it SBMM or skill-based matchmaking throughout the whole video for ease of explanation, is in place in the game. In these research papers, they're defending the point that without SBMM, COD will die, and every player except for good players will quit and the game will be sweaty anyways. So the problem we're facing right now, playing inconsistent and jarringly unfun matches, won't be remedied no matter how you slice it. If they keep SBMM, we play only sweats because we're isolated. Remove SBMM, we play only sweats because everyone else quits. But what if I told you that despite all the data, all of the research and information they've presented, they're just doing it to hide and defend a much more diabolical objective? One that once you realize, you'll want a refund faster than you can say, just get good. So based on information from the paper, it's safe to assume that Activision is putting forth one main hypothesis. Without skill measurement and matchmaking, a game dies. This hypothesis is made very clear throughout multiple different passages in the papers. Activision mentions the game's ecosystem being healthier when good and bad players are separated, and the fact that low and mid-skilled players are quitting when skill measurements are removed. They conclude that their SBMM system is the best for everyone in the entire player base, and that it keeps the game thriving and the players happy. Now, there are holes we can poke in this argument that render it lazy, deceptive, and completely false. First, remember Call of Duty multiplayer from 2003 to 2012. This would be Call of Duty 1 to Call of Duty Black Ops 2. This type of matchmaking was not present throughout any of those games. In fact, it was very evident that matchmaking was nearly 100% ping-based, with some loose skill measurements noticeable in 2012's Black Ops 2. Even then, that game is still regarded as the best in the series. Call of Duty was thriving in this era, and put simply, it completely revolutionized the first-person shooter and was an absolute titan in the gaming world. So, the evidence of their past already suggests otherwise. But of course, this refutation of their argument doesn't go uncontested in the article. As a counter-argument, they say that similar systems like the ones in place now were also used in titles like COD 4 Modern Warfare. Now, being completely candid when I say this argument is genuinely so unprofessional, so weak, and so terrible that I'm genuinely surprised they included it, because it's incredibly obvious that the game clearly did not operate like this back then. If similar systems were used in Golden Age COD titles, where skill was more important than ping, we wouldn't be seeing people with nearby zip codes in their clan tags, and we wouldn't have been experiencing the lobby balance and entertainment that we would have experienced. Modern SBMM is causing an outrage among players nowadays. If similar systems were in place in older games, surely this outrage would have also happened as well back then, and those games would have not been regarded as quality titles, rather just rigged attempts at cash grabbing. Saying similar systems were used in older titles like COD 4 is such a risky and lazy argument for their modern system that is riding the borderline between lie and truth. Sure, some teeny tiny skill measurements might have been used, even for something as small as team balancing, but calling it similar to the PSYOP matchmaking we see in Modern Warfare 3 nowadays is something that you have to do some serious mental gymnastics to actually believe. If the Golden Age Call of Duty games showed us anything, it's that prioritizing fun and the quality of the game is the best way to satisfy players. COD got increasingly better from 2003 to 2012, reaching what many believe to be its peak in 2012 with Black Ops 2, and despite skill matching being slightly more noticeable in that game, it's still a fan favorite. So this goes as far to say that even with light skill matching, a game can still be good. Another key reason that this paper is all a fabrication is because of how Activision behaves. Truly, actions do speak louder than words. Don't pay attention to what they say in all of their research papers as much as you pay attention to how they act. How do they behave in regards to no skill matching? The real truth is, they seem genuinely terrified of games without SBMM. They don't even believe what they're presenting in their own research papers, and they're clearly biased towards some other more diabolical objective, because they were clearly afraid of XDefiant and H2M. If hard data supports supports their hypothesis that games without SBMM ultimately fail, why try to interfere with the hype cycle of a game like XDefiant taking away sales or players? Activision dropped trailers and teasers the same week XDefiant was teasing and releasing the game. They also officially revealed the name of their next COD game as Black Ops 6, when nearly every single reliable leaker identified the game as Black Ops Gulf War. Not to mention that leaked gameplay looks like an obvious sequel to Cold War. Long story short, Activision took time, energy, and resources and changed their IP to interfere with XDefiant. But why contest it? It's free after all, and won't every single player in the demographic get aggravated at XDefiant because of the lack of skill matching? The game is basically COD without SBMM, right? And according to their quote-unquote experiments, COD with no SBMM dies in the end. Won't bad and mediocre players get mad in XDefiant because they're getting beaten by sweats and go back to COD because it has skill matching? Won't good players get frustrated because the other players left and they're left only playing sweats, which is equally as aggravating? If Activision's research is actually true, XDefiant could never be a threat to Call of Duty because according to Activision, having no skill matching would essentially kill the game, which would lead players right back to COD anyways, which has SBMM. Why try to interfere with the hype surrounding XDefiant when the game was just doomed anyways, especially when you're spending resources and changing around whole IPs, which ultimately interferes with the marketing that you had planned for the game. Furthermore, Activision just shut down a community mod that allowed players to play basically a version of Modern Warfare 2 Remastered. That game has a server browser, which means no SBMM. Activision's reasoning behind the shutdown of this mod was that they were nervous that the game would take away sales from Black Ops 6. But this logic once again makes no sense if they truly believe having no SBMM kills a game. And further, players had to buy Modern Warfare Remastered to play this mod, which means they had to give Activision money anyways. Secondly, and perhaps an even more glaring issue, players that want to play H2M have absolutely no interest in playing new Call of Duty games, so they won't affect sales at all. Every single player they screwed over by shutting down H2M is not going to suddenly hand the company that completely scammed them $70 for the newest title. To be completely honest, the only reason that a 15-year-old game can still be relevant is the fact that the current iteration is so bad and reversed so many things that made the franchise good that players have to revert to a very dated iteration of the franchise. So Activision has two inconsistencies that make it very hard to believe they genuinely think using their form of SBMM is the best for their entire player base. Firstly, past titles from around 2007 to 2012 clearly disprove that using heavy matchmaking is the way to go when it comes to player satisfaction. This time period was the most popular and beloved the franchise has ever been, and it's also the least present any form of SBMM was in Call of Duty's lifespan. Further, the argument they have against this point doesn't hold up, as Golden Age Call of Duty games don't even come close to using any system similar to what we see now. Saying old COD games use whatever COD uses now is about as close to a lie as you can get without being completely illegal. Secondly, Call of Duty has clearly tried to interfere with games that have no SBMM at all, namely XDefiant and H2M. And it's not like this happened sometime in the past. This happened very recently, after these papers were published and their philosophy was made known to the public eye. They still went ahead and contested both XDefiant and H2M, trying to stifle XDefiant's hype and completely shutting down H2M with a cease and desist. And let's not forget that they also cease and desisted many other community mods without SBMM as well in 2023, like XLabs and SM2. The players that are playing XDefiant and H2M instead of COD clearly aren't interested in dropping $70 in the latest COD title. Both games were designed for players that are sick of modern Call of Duty tarnishing the legacy of the franchise. If both XDefiant and H2M were doomed to die because, according to the hard data and research, no SBMM kills a game, why even spend resources, change your IPs, and turn the player base against you by canceling a mod just to kill games that, according to them, would ultimately die anyways? They're sacrificing a lot to make sure that these games without SBMM have a harder time getting off the ground. Their actions are extremely inconsistent with their hypothesis. So what you must realize is that Activision does not truly believe that their SBMM system is the best for all players. Players are the least satisfied they've ever been, and other games like XDefiant are becoming the transparent and trustworthy alternative to COD's overbearing and manipulative systems. So why defend this system that is clearly ruining their franchise? Well, it's simply because they desire to defend it, but not for the sake of player retention and satisfaction. Rather, it's purely just for money. After all, why Why defend a system that is aggravating a lot of players and causing them to quit when you had a much more successful system back when the system wasn't even noticeable? It's about driving microtransactions after the initial $70 purchase of the game. And COD had microtransactions ever since you could buy camo packs and then loot boxes. But I'm talking about heavy microtransactions, reminiscent of Fortnite, a store full of expensive skins and a battle pass, and later premium battle passes and $30 skins. The first introduction of this modern SBMM system in disbanding lobbies and the whole overbearing matchmaking crisis started in 2019, and that just so happened to be the same game that introduced these forms of microtransactions within the game, a complete battle pass and super expensive bundles. And that's not a coincidence. They're not defending whether or not these systems they have in place satisfy the most players. They're painting the false picture that they're chasing overall player satisfaction, when in reality, they're actually defending a system that makes them the most money possible. Who cares about retention when you can have the almighty dollar? Would you rather have 1 million players and $50 million of sales, or 500,000 players but $100 million in sales? This is exactly what people are missing in their argument. This is why Call of Duty is so painful to play once you're awake, but more so if you never buy skins and just bought the game initially. It's all about pushing microtransactions, not satisfying players. After all, with a system that is causing more outrage on the internet and among the player base than any other matchmaking system in gaming history, it makes no other sense if you assume anything else besides money. They're not garnering a good reputation. They're not trustworthy. Most of the outspoken player base is completely and utterly dissatisfied with the game. But none of that ultimately matters if the money they make from game sales and microtransactions is the most they've ever made. That's the only reason they double down on SBMM. Even the change from Modern Warfare 2 to Modern Warfare 3 was absolutely outrageous. People complained about the matchmaking in MW2, but in the next title, it was even worse. Making a change completely contrary to player opinions and doubling down on stuff that players hate is indicative that there's something going on that they're not telling us. We have to follow the money trail. Somehow, whatever matchmaking system they're using is garnering more money than Call of Duty has ever made before, and doubling down on it is making them see improvements to it. This all makes perfect sense. I invite you to read this patent. It's Activision created and owned, and it's called Systems and Methods for Driving Microtransactions in Multiplayer Video Games. It details down to the most precise methods of how microtransactions are subtly marketed towards players through usage of matchmaking and other practices within the game. For example, matching good players with skins against bad players that don't have skins to make bad players think skins make you better. This is just one small example. Another example is it observes that you like sniping, but you have no sniper skins. So it'll match you against a guy who's really good at sniping with a blueprint sniper skin and then make him beat you. That's also an example detailed in the patent. But Activision clearly doesn't believe that SBMM is the best for player retention and that no SBMM kills a game. Otherwise, Golden Age COD titles wouldn't have been successful, and they never would have tried to interfere with XDefiant or H2M and X Labs and SM2 earlier in 2023, which are all games without SBMM. There is no reason to shut them down unless they believe that games without SBMM can contest their current titles with SBMM. So the ultimate point is they're lying in their research papers. They're defending the wrong point. They come at it from a player retention and satisfaction standpoint, but in reality, they're really defending making money. They don't actually believe that SBMM retains and satisfies players the most. They're hiding their objective of making the most money possible and sacrificing players that don't spend money on microtransactions to do it. The game is literally a microtransaction simulator, and you're better off playing any other title that doesn't prioritize this and instead prioritizes quality and entertainment. But thanks for listening, and I hope it opened your eyes. Let me know your thoughts in the